So let's talk about the types of connective tissue. Remember that there are 4 basic types of connective tissue. The first type that we're listing here, areolar connective tissue and adipose tissue, are considered loose versions of connective tissue proper. Dense regular connective tissue, and also its close cousin, dense irregular connective tissue, is also considered under that umbrella of connective tissue proper. Cartilage is its own category, bone is its own category, and blood is its own category. So let's take a look at that areolar connective tissue first. This is very recognizable. I actually don't think this is the best picture of it, but it gives you an idea, so make sure to look at different texts and pictures so that you can get a really good perspective of this. Areolar connective tissue is special. You probably haven't heard of it before, but it actually is everywhere in your body. If you have, oftentimes this will exist as that connective tissue that is supporting the epithelial tissue. You will recall that epithelial tissue is avascular, no blood supply, so it must be fed by connective tissues underlying it. So it's oftentimes areolar connective tissue that makes that up. So you'll see some of the descriptions and functions here. You're going to have pretty much any of the collagen and elastin fibers in here. You'll have cells called fibroblasts. You'll also have plenty of white blood cells in the area. And the roles there you can see, wraps and cushions organs. One of the things that areolar connective tissue is known for is edema. During an infection, during an inflammation, the areolar connective tissue tends to soak up excess fluids. The edema is amazing because it allows for a lot of interstitial fluid to seep into an area with lots of different consequences. We'll be talking about that down the line when we talk about the immune system. But for now, maybe just to keep in mind that pretty much whenever you see swelling in your body, that is called edema, and that is the result of areolar connective tissue taking in excess interstitial fluid. Just remember that interstitial fluid was one of those ground substance structures. The next tissue we're going to be looking at is adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is a little unusual amongst connective tissue in that it is made mostly of cells, and the cells in this case are called adipocytes. This takes up, depending on the person, 18 to 50% of total body weight. Most of your body weight most of your adipocytes are going to be found in your hypodermis or your superficial fascia, as shown in the sketches here. You will also find plenty of adipose tissue in other places in your body. It wraps around the kidneys. You'll find adipose tissue protecting some blood vessels, the coronary blood vessels of your heart. You'll find it buried within your intestines. So it's in many different places, but we tend to think of it as, what we consider to be fat in our body. Adipose tissue is highly vascularized. This actually points out a characteristic of connective tissue that is not uncommon amongst connective tissues. If you recall back to epithelial tissue, you will recall that kind of famously, epithelial tissue tends not to be vascular, tends not to have any kind of blood vessels at all. In the case of connective tissue, there is a high variety of vascularity. So adipose tissue tends to be one of the tissues that is highly vascular, which means there are many blood vessels found here. What you're looking at here in this picture are cells, believe it or not, even though they just kind of look like nothing. So what happens, you can see the cell membrane. What happens is the nucleus and all of the organelles are squished to the side. So they are traditional cells. They have nucleus, they have organelles, all this stuff. But there is so much adipose, there is so much lipid inside of these cells that you tend to squish all the cell contents, all the other cell contents to the side. So they are primarily fat. So you can see the functions there. Adipose tissue provides reserves for fuel, insulates against heat loss, and supports and protects organs. If you were wondering why fat exists, there it is. Okay, the next connective tissue may make the list of your instructor or may not. It's one that we tend to only cover in the second semester of the class when we talk about the immune system, and specifically when we talk about the lymphatic system. So this connective tissue is called reticular connective tissue. So you may add it to your list or not. It's one of the connective tissue proper subcategories. And it has a particular look to it. It always tends to stain in black. These fibers here are called reticular fibers, which tend to only exist in reticular connective tissue, and they tend to stain rather black. If you look closely, what you'll see in between all those black fibers are tons and tons of cells. The idea of the reticular connective tissue is that it supports all of the white blood cells of your body. Pretty much they reside here. You will see some white blood cells migrating through the blood, but the bulk of white blood cells in your body will live within reticular connective tissue, which comprises the entirety of the lymphatic system. So more on that in the second semester. Just keep it in mind. All right, dense connective tissue, both dense regular connective tissue and dense irregular connective tissue, is mostly made of fibers, mostly made of collagen fibers, and collagen tends to stain pink. So when you look at dense connective tissue, it's just going to be masses of pink pretty much every time. It is poorly vascularized. So this is the opposite of adipose tissue. Remember that adipose tissue has a great deal of vascularity. Dense connective tissue tends to be poorly vascularized. And here's a pretty good example of dense regular connective tissue. You can see the collagen fibers in this case that are this beautiful wavy line where they're kind of following each other along. That is all collagen. Remember, collagen means strength. So you will find these beautiful lines following each other, kind of this S-shaped, sinusoidal shape. There are fibroblasts within here, some of the cells that are characteristic of this type of tissue. Okay, so the function here, when you think about tendons and ligaments, this is going to be your dense, regular connective tissue. And here's a picture of tendon, ligament. Ligament will connect bone to bone. Tendon connects muscle to bone. This is an example of dense, irregular connective tissue, and you can start to see the difference between them. This is dense regular. This is dense irregular. Still all fibers. So just a few fibroblasts in between, but you can see all that pink, that massive amount of pink there. I think this is a very beautiful fiber just because it stains pink so beautifully, and it has that sort of artistic mishmash of the collagen fibers that just go in all different directions. Yeah, so collagen strength, very, very strong. Because of the irregular way that the collagen fibers are set up, this tends to be extremely resistant to tearing or compression in any direction. Places where you'll find dense irregular connective tissue are rather famously in the dermis of your skin, the reticular layer of your dermis, which makes up the bulk of your dermis. This is your leather jacket. Here we have a joint capsule where it's really holding the strength of the joint capsule. So very, very strong, resilient tissue.